So this is going to be the format of the classes just for a little bit until I get better equipment and I can set up a nice computer and I can have a Zoom meeting and have people actually in the class. But I wanted to start by doing a lesson on ego and giving you guys a little fun homework, okay? It's not going to be reading a textbook or anything like that. It's just a fun little experiment exercise for you to start to understand your ego, your personal ego. So it's going to be a really quick one, but I wanted to get you guys a little bit more familiar with this idea of the ego. Okay, so the ego, it starts when you get a name. You're born, someone lays on you a piece of language, okay? That language has obviously linguistic ramifications, but also cultural ramifications over time. So this is how this all works. So first, it's a linguistic ramification because there's a sonic effect to everybody's name. You notice sometimes you'll find that a person with the same name will kind of have a lot of the same personality traits and end up doing a lot of the same things. Like, that's a total Chad, or that's a Karen, right? Whatever. No disrespect to people who have that name, but you get the idea. There's a certain energy sonically and visually of a name in and of itself. So this is affecting who you are as a person. So now you have, okay, we'll just use me as an example. You have Mark, my government name. Mark is given a name. Mark's father's name is also Mark. So now Mark has an energetic connection to his father, not just because he's his father, because they shared the same name. And now there's a sort of living up to the Mark that came before. My father purposely gave me a different middle name than me because he didn't want this idea of him being a senior over me or having Mark the second. I think he wanted me to be my own person in some respect, but he wanted me to have that first name because the name means warrior. And he wanted me to be a warrior in the world. So look, all these things are compounding already on that name. That's creating my ego. So as I get older and I can understand language and I can understand these concepts, I start to become familiar with them. Now I'm taking that on as an ego. Now I have my organic desires, and I also have my taught desires. When I was a very little kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist. For some reason, I loved nature. I loved digging in the dirt and discovering stuff that comes out of the dirt. And, I saw Jurassic Park. I'm like, that's it. I want to understand these beasts in a deeper way. And the only evidence I have of them, obviously, is the fossils, okay? Now, it goes on for, like, my dad was a Raiders fan, okay? That's another thing. I became a Raiders fan by proxy because he liked them, not because I wanted to in general. So then I started watching Raiders games, right? As I got older, I liked it and I followed them. Even when I lived in New York, I was still a Raiders fan. No matter how many times people picked on me, I stayed with it. I'm watching the Super Bowl in, like, it was the year 2000 or 2001, whatever year it was, they played the Buccaneers. And when they lost that game, I was upset. For days, I was upset. Why was I upset? Because it was part of my ego, and my ego was attacked externally into a cultural idea that I had interwoven my ego into. So in that way, that my ego, that was my cultural ego. And then my psychological ego is like, I made a bet with my friends. I think I put money on it or something or other, right? And my friends are dogging the fuck out of me because their egos are involved too. It's like, fuck this California Raider guy, right? They're still my friends, but there's an ego aspect of that. And so we were at war at that point in a small way. There's a little fighting and a little, energy because my ego was threatened and their ego was being gassed up. And now the question becomes, it's fun to play these cultural games and play a character. The issue occurs when we forget that we're playing a character. We forget that that's a persona. We become attached to the persona, so then we're at the mercy of the energetic flow of culture and linguistics, and we let our emotions be affected by that. At a certain level, we have to have apathy. We have to be apathetic to the process. Play the character, get off the stage and say that was interesting. Not take the character home with us. And when I mean home with us in this metaphor, it's internalizing it within. We should be able to play a character and capture the joy without bringing home the negativity. Now here's a deep metaphor about that. In Zen Buddhism, in Buddhism mostly in general, they see the world as an illusion called Maya, right? A grand stage. But at the heart of it, they see it as a sandbox, right? It could be good or it could be bad. It could be a playground or it can be a prison. The Gnostics, however, of Gnostic Christianity, ultimately believe that this is a prison. They took their minds there with this, okay? So they had a negative relationship with nature. The Buddhists had a neutral relationship, and the Abrahamics have a generally positive. They see the nature of evil and wickedness, but ultimately they're like, okay, this ends in a happy ending. The world is a comedy. Gnostic Christian said the world is a tragedy. The Buddhist said, play whatever play you want to play. So, bringing this back to these ideas of our own ego, when we're playing this game, we need to be cognizant that it's a game. When we do that, we can still have an ego, but we're pulling the strings. Not the language, not the culture, not our biological predispositions. And we'll get into biological predispositions later, but I want to keep this one idea, the cultural ego. Because there's a biological one that when your food is threatened, when you've embarrassed yourself in a group and you feel your social currency has gone down, that's a fear response. That's a terror management response. These deep terrors of dying, of not understanding the mystery of the universe, of feeling alone, touching the unknown. These hearken to our biological urges, which manifest themselves in the psychological, more complex conscious ego, right? Because when someone says something to you that you disagree with, you'll fold your arms. The reason you're folding your arms when you get into an argument with somebody is because you're protecting your vital organs. Your vital organs aren't in danger, but that there's a part of your brain that's making that decision that can't delineate and separate biological threats from psychological ones. At one level, they're the same thing for that mind-body experience, but they're not the same thing. Okay, so as Twitch pointed out, there are physical responses that basically telegraph the ego. Like you said, the jerking of the collarbone. And I said the flaring of the nostrils. The reason you flare your nostrils when you're upset is because you're opening up your pathways to take more oxygen in to get ready to fight. Physically, you're oxygenating your blood for physical activity. So when you're like that's pre-fight mode. Whether or not you're actually going to fight with somebody, your body does it automatically, like oxygenate the blood. It's about to go down. And so that's another thing we'll touch later. But right now, cultural ego is important. So I guess the homework I want you guys to do, okay? And so this will be kind of like a passing the class homework. I want you to sit down and think of all the linguistic and cultural attachments you have with your ego, okay? Sports team, religion, friend group, favorite brand of phone or clothing. You know what I mean? There's a checks versus stripes with Nike and Adidas, and there really is some ego attached there. So start making a list of all the ways that you may be attached to culture through your ego. Not just like you like watching certain kinds of movies. Like if you're a science fiction buff, or if you're a Gandalf over Dumbledore. Like really think, and then go in to all those lists, your favorite sports team, your religion, and ask yourself why your ego chose to play those games. Ooh, right? Now we're getting into the spicy shit. Because a lot of times we don't even question why we picked this religion or that sports team, and we think it's just by divine order. But a lot of it's not. A lot of it's by the karmic momentum of your existence, which happened even before you were born, that laid foundations for that momentum to occur in your life for you to pick the things that you picked. You didn't really pick them. Your ego did, which was given to you, and which you may not have complete control over. So list those things you have cultural relationships with, and then ask yourself why exactly you picked that sports team. Is it your sports team? Or is it somebody else's that was given to you? Because your ego fit like a catalyst and an enzyme in your blood with somebody else's ego, and then they transfer that to you. Okay, think about these ideas. So it's a little bit of homework. Sit down and write all of your cultural and linguistic. So when I say linguistic, it's like your philosophies, your axioms, the phrases you use, your gestures and your mannerisms. Where have you taken from other things to collect that and build up this character? When you start doing this, you're going to be able to find ways to detach. So you become the observer, right? What's the ego, the id, and the superego. I may be messing this up, but there is this 3-part, and so I'll use the id. I may be using it incorrectly, but the same idea stands. Think of the id as the conscious observer. I'm not sure if that's what it is, so don't double check it, but think of it this way. You have a character, you have a conscious observer behind the character that you're not always aware of because you're living in the ego. Then you have superego, right? Or this like God consciousness, okay? Character you're playing, the conscious being that plays the character that you need to sometimes separate from, and collective consciousness, like when you're sitting out in the field and you meditate and all of a sudden you feel that tree and you are that tree. That's at 3 levels of consciousness. So by discovering and understanding the ego, in the future, you won't be subject or at the mercy of the ego being attacked, because you'll remember it's just a character. So I hope this was helpful, guys. I'm excited to do the first class, even though it's just in my car on my phone. Let me know what you guys think. If there's things I missed, go ahead and do some Q&A inside this room about this video. And I want you guys to submit some kind of document about this list that you made. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys figured out, the things you came up with, and also maybe questions or revelations you had because you did this exercise. Have a wonderful day, and talk to you guys soon.